Hello, everyone. My name is GraceWagner, and I am going to be taking this opportunity to go through my capstone that I had the opportunity to work on this past semester, looking at developing a riparian restoration plan for areas along the Grand Kankakee Marsh. And first, just taking a look at the historical context of the area, I wanted to highlight how at one point this wetland, the Grand Kankakee Marsh, spanned over 1 million acres. And then once colonization began, the area was dredged, disconnecting the wetlands from the Kankakee River. Currently, there are a lot of conservation efforts being made by land trusts, government agencies, etc., and this project is meant to serve as an example for these organizations to use as they continue to acquire land and bring back the natural characteristics of this natural wonder. Okay, now taking a quick look at my team and key informants, I was working on the Northwest Indiana Kelp Plan team under the direction of Dr. Erin Thompson with assist from Grace Lens. And this project's goal is to directly benefit Shirley Hines Land Trust. And I was able to speak with Caroline Loughran there with the goal of having this be an example, as I mentioned before, as they continue to acquire more land. And then I was able to speak with Craig Zanstra on site, get a proper tour of the area. Gary Bentrip, he served as a resource during my research portion of this project. And Fred Phillips, he provided a lot of historical information. And then Danielle Winterley, she also provided information on wetland restoration techniques. And then looking at the ecoregion analysis, this is where my analysis began. I wanted to zoom in on the southeast portion of Lake County and look at what exactly is going on along the river there. And here I looked at the different types of ecoregions and keystone species in this area, trying to find an area that is very biologically diverse. So we looked at different freshwater emergent wetlands and forested shrub wetlands in addition to ponds and lakes, and then what type of species would be in each. Next, I took a look at the riparian edge conditions in this same region, trying to find areas that could have improved riparian buffers, and the Kankakee River itself is one of those areas, definitely. And then looking at water quality assessment, just seeing what the target points are for the area, especially when looking at E. coli, dissolved oxygen, and temperature. And all of these paired together will hopefully, well, were able to steer me in the direction of which site to end up selecting. So ultimately, I selected site option 2, which is located in the middle here on this diagram. And under the direction of Danielle Winterley, as I mentioned before, she recommended that I look at the oxbow characteristic in the landscape. And when this river had its natural curvatures during flood events, this area was pivotal for biological diversity and ecology, and having that element in the landscape is really like an ecological hub, and it still is, but trying to find a way to connect this back into the river. And then also outlining my general project goals, I wanted to improve water quality, increase overall biodiversity, while also incorporating low impact pedestrian engagement opportunities and moments for education. And then following the GIS analysis, I was able to go out on site. The site is about 300 acres. At the time, I was only able to look at the west portion of the site due to flooding. But honestly, this gave me a great opportunity to understand the point that the site was at, maybe not on its best day in terms of weather. And then looking at the site scale analysis, I again was looking at those ecoregions and riparian buffers, as I mentioned before. And then also looking at that water quality analysis. And as kind of suspected, the worst water quality is in the hotter summer months. And one way that this can be mitigated is improving shade cover along the edges of the river and other wetland structures in the site. And then this just kind of looks at the precedent imagery that I used to inspire the design process. And these align with my goals, so improving water quality, increasing biodiversity, and then providing opportunities for pedestrian engagement. And now these images will be later expanded on in my framework plan, which is shown here, where I have my toolkit of parts that are divided by my goals of improving water quality, improving habitat structure, and providing those pedestrian engagement opportunities. Now, based on my site visit, I wanted to keep a lot of the pedestrian engagement along the west side of the site where it runs and meets with the only road that goes through the site here. Um, just to kind of mitigate the effects of like too much pedestrian impact on the rest of the site and keep that wetland restoration element strong in the central core. There is this like number 10, which is the sensitively placed trails. There would be a trail placed around the site, which is kind of following the line of an existing trail already there. Just kind of having an opportunity to engage a little bit more while still keeping that pedestrian impact towards the edges and being aware of the migration patterns and minimizing disruption. And then looking at these other toolkits, the rest of the toolkit that I have here created in these axons, the blue ones are talking about improving water quality through windbreaks, phytoremediation plantings, big stabilization through two-stage ditches, or adding riprap reinforcement in addition to a more vegetated buffer system. And then looking at habitat quality by introducing woody material into the streams, the site-wide removal of invasives and increase of natives, introducing more spawning beds in those shallow areas along the river, and then also including bank habitat restoration. And now looking at this is about a 5-acre portion of the site, which we go back here, is here where all the pedestrian engagement is focused. This is how the wetland restoration portion will be incorporated in this like smaller site. I wanted to keep a lot of the buffers and erosion stabilization along the Kankakee River while also still introducing it, especially in this central island where there's a lot of just mown grass, so there isn't a lot of structure along those edges, creating kind of a mud pit situation. So mitigating those effects. And then this is just speaking to the invasives that need to be removed and the natives that should be prioritized. On site, there was a big Phragmites problem, so just paying a little bit more attention to that as well moving forward. And then these two sections just highlight two different ways that there can be bank stabilization implemented through riprap reinforcement or the two-stage ditch. The two-stage ditch, you would need a little bit more wiggle room because you would be doing a lot more grade changes. But it gives the opportunity for, in a flood event, this area to be another type of habitat for different amphibians and wildlife. Whereas the riprap reinforcement, that also can serve as a habitat structure, but it's more for areas that don't have as severe erosion issues or are not already existing straight ag ditches. And then this is just kind of looking at the overall programming of the site, having a lot of wildlife observation areas in the core with just improving existing conditions, which include the boat launch parking lot in addition to the main parking lot and then the community gathering center. And then this is just looking at those pedestrian engagement opportunities I was talking about earlier with the wetland boardwalk going through these little islands that are already existing. And I thought that would be a great opportunity to kind of see the changing topography and different like plant material throughout the site. And then the marsh alcove, I thought that this was such an interesting part of the site, this big area of trees just growing in a very flooded area. I saw a lot of different little amphibians and birds out there while I was there, so I thought that this would be a great spot just for some passive observation at a little bit of a lower scale for pedestrians to go and observe the habitats and ecology in that area. And then the sections below are just describing the process of riparian buffers and phytoremediation plantings and those processes, talking specifically with the riparian buffers about keeping an undisturbed area and a managed zone as well, just to kind of keep that natural state along the immediate edges. And then finally, taking a look at the wildlife outlook point. This area is part of an ecotourism hub in Northwest Indiana. There are other parks nearby, Kankakee Sands, Jasper Pulaski Fish and Wildlife, and then Willow Slough Fish and Wildlife, with a lot of bird sightings and other ecological hotspots in the area. And I wanted to provide an area a little bit more north and just bring more awareness to the Grand Kankakee Marsh. This is a great opportunity to improve awareness for the site and this overall wildlife hub that can be only be continued to be enhanced. And just bringing awareness to the area is the first step. I'd like to thank you all so much for all the assistance and advice and information you've been able to provide me throughout this process. I hope that you enjoyed this quick little overview, and I'm looking forward to keeping in contact and hearing from you. Thank you. Have a good day.